Hey everybody, today I'd like to discuss Celtic Frost, one of the most legendary metal bands of all time. They formed in Switzerland out of the ashes of Hellhammer in 1984. And when I say influential, you can't call Celtic Frost death metal, black metal, doom metal, thrash metal, or even classic heavy metal. But they influenced all these things. And I just consider them old school extreme metal. Bands like Nirvana were big fans back in the day. I think a lot of the metal influenced New York City hardcore, such as Sheer Terror, Agnostic Front, Chrome Egg, stuff like that. I think they got a lot of their style from Celtic Frost. The list goes on and on. So the band would put out 5 albums by the early 90s. They would split up, reform in the 2000s, where they would release their 6th and final album, Monotheist, and then Tom G. Warrior would go on to form Triptykon, which they have 2 full-length albums. And even though I believe Triptykon is still an active band, that second album came out a full decade ago, so I'm sure we'll be getting some new material from them sometime soon. And speaking of Triptykon, my 6th and last place release here shares a lot in style with Triptykon, which is Monotheist from 2006. Try as I may, I've never really been able to connect to this album. I just don't really like it. It's, I like dark music, of course, but it's just such an oppressive atmosphere. I derive no pleasure from it. It feels very kind of cold and industrial. Well, not really being an industrial sounding album, but it just kind of feels that way. It's almost like a goth rock meets new metal, but granted painted pitch black and deadly serious. But these riffs really just, they don't do much for me and have me thinking, hate to say it, new metal. My favorite tracks on here are probably the very heavily goth-influenced Obscured and probably 8, Ain Elohim. Many people who I respect say this is a total masterpiece. Some say it is the best album in the band's catalog. And who am I to criticize Tom G. Warrior? That's fair enough, but in my opinion, it is number 6. Number 5, Cold Lake from 1988. Big style switch here, and the back cover will tell you all you need to know. Definitely much more of a 80s mainstream glam rock, glam metal influence. But if you ask me, the heart of the band is still present. It's still total Tom G. Warrior on the vocals. I think there's lots of good riffs on here. None of the songs are great, I will say that, but at the end of the day, what album am I going to put on for pleasure? It's going to be Cold Lake all day. Starts off pretty rough. The intro, Human, it's like a 1-minute, late 80s rap song, and not a good one at that. Seduce Me Tonight, pretty goofy. But then by number 3, you got Petty Obsession, one of my favorite tracks on here. Once They Were Eagles, that's a good song too. Cherry Orchards, the single and probably the most well-known song on here. I like that. Then you got Juices Like Wine, which is probably my one of my top 2 on here. And some of these songs, again, like Petty Obsession and Juices Like Wine, especially in the guitar riffs and the solos, it really brings me back to Abigail era King Diamond. It totally reminds me of that. Obviously not in the vocal department, but it just shows you there's still some good metal on here. And then the several tracks I haven't mentioned are all good, not great. So overall, I do like this album, despite some cringy vocals here and there and some cringy lyrics for sure. But overall, not bad at all. Number 4, Vanity Nemesis from 1990. from here on up, I'm going to be looking at, I have copies of these BMG Noise re-releases, digibooks, lots of bonus tracks, and they were really cheap when they came out, actually. But on to the music. I don't hear much good or bad about this album. It's kind of lost to time a little bit. But overall, I think this is a really good album, definitely taking a step away from the mainstream rock and back towards the metal after Cold Lake. My favorite tracks on here are probably The Heart Beneath, The Rest of the Seas. I will say the last two songs, Vanity and Nemesis, respectively. This Island Earth is a pretty bad track, actually. And the best thing about this album is that I think the riffs on here are pretty sick. Some of the best riffs of Celtic Frost's career. And pretty much all these songs, except for, again, This Island Earth, are good. But I have a major complaint that kind of spoils my enjoyment of it. There's background female vocals during the choruses of most of these songs. And I got no problem with female vocals. It's just the style that they're working with here. It doesn't do much for me. And like Celtic Frost's dabbling in the female vocals goes all the way back to Megatherion. But it's just very present here. And again, I'm not a fan of that. But overall, great album. Number 3, Morbid Tales, the debut album from 1984. A lot of old school fans will tell you this is the best one. It does rule, but the next couple albums will be more highbrow, polished, substantial, while still having these old school extreme metal roots. Pretty obvious picks here, but I'm going to go with Morbid Tales and Procreation of the Wicked as my two favorites, but you can't go wrong with other classics like Into the Crypts of Rays, Dethroned Emperor, Nocturnal Fear. Could go on and on. Number 2, Into the Pandemonium from 1987. Probably the Frost album I play the most due to its weirdness and variety. Cold Lake was a big surprise a couple years in the future, but this was a massive surprise to the metal world as well, after to Megatherion, this being their third album. You're going to start it off with Mexican Radio, which is a cover of a new wave song by a band called Wall of Voodoo. I still kind of question what kind of a decision that was to make it the opener, but I think it just adds to the absurdity of it while still being its own unique classic. Track 2, Mesmerize, ahead of its time, goth metal classic. Inner Sanctum, total old school Frost banger, one of their best tracks. Following that, you got Tristices de la Lune, kind of a short neoclassical piece. Babylon Fell, another classic metal track. Caress into Oblivion, kind of getting back into the goth world again. One in Their Pride, kind of like an electronic dance song, totally weird. I Won't Dance, that's like metal meets pop rock through a metal filter. Very strange. Rex Irae, another somewhat classically influenced piece, and closing off with the grand, pompous outro, Oriental Masquerade. Totally bizarre album. Great album artwork. Classic. So that leaves my number 1 Celtic Frost album to be the second full-length album, 1985's To Megatherion. While having a lot in common with Morbid Tales, I just think it takes it to the next level. It's more polished, highbrow, well played, influential even. Just a total classic from beginning to end. You have classic songs like The Usurper, Circle of the Tyrants, Necromantical Screams, but my two personal favorites have to be Jewel Throne and Eternal Summer. For what it's worth, this version here has got some cool bonus tracks. We're talking The Emperor's Return EP. I especially like Suicidal Winds and Journey into Fear, but I'm going to consider these songs as not being part of this album. So that's my ranking. 2 Megatherion is, in my opinion, the best Celtic Frost album. And I hope you check them out if you have not. Take it easy. See ya.